Welcome back to Detailed, an original podcast by ARCAT. This is a show where we uncover lessons learned to help you navigate your next project. I'm Cherise Lakeside, Senior Spec Writer at RDH Building Science, and your host. My returning guest today, and by the way, one of my most favorite guests ever, is Mariam Issoufou, founder and principal at Mariam Issoufou Architects with offices in New York, Niamey, Niger, and Zurich. Mariam is the founder and principal of Mariam Issoufou Architects, a research-based practice whose designs are creative responses to identity, place, and history. Founded in 2014, the award-winning firm has offices in Niamey and New York. Along with running her practice, Issoufou is a full professor of architecture heritage and sustainability at ETH Zurich. The project we're talking about today is Gourmega, a socially minded supper club in Manhattan's South Village Historic District in New York. Located on the ground floor of a landmarked 1883 building in Manhattan's South Village Historic District, Gourmega reimagines a compact historic space as a flexible restaurant rooted in food, culture, and community. And I have to add, I'm super excited that I get to meet Mariam in person in New York this week. Now, let's get into the details. Welcome back to Detailed. I am so unbelievably excited today to welcome back to the show Mariam Issoufou, founder and principal at Mariam Issoufou Architects with offices in New York, Niamey, Niger, and Zurich. I practice that. Just so you know, I practice that. The project we're talking about today is Gourmega, a socially minded supper club in Manhattan's South Village Historic District in New York, which is a place I'm trying to figure out how I can come back and visit just so I can hang out with Mariam. Mariam, I am so happy to have you back on the show. I'll just tell everybody, this is my number one favorite guest. We're up to almost 200 episodes of the show. I've had a lot of amazing guests, so please, nobody be offended. I have met a lot of really incredible people, but sometimes you meet somebody and you just click and connect. And
so true.
That's you. So welcome back.
Thank you, Cherise. It's such a pleasure. And you are my favorite podcaster.
Oh,
it's been wonderful. So I'm very excited to be back.
So what have you been up to since we spoke last? We talked about the Rolex Pavilion. Yes. What have you been up to since then?
Since we last spoke, we've been really busy building the office in New York since it's relatively new compared to our office in Niamey. And, we've been busy sort of putting the final touches on this small project we did here in New York, and which opened about 2 months ago, I believe. And it's been extremely well received. We've been getting it's triggered a lot of conversations, a lot of press. So we've also been very grateful, just sitting in, gratitude for that.
Well, I'm excited to talk about it because it is very interesting. But first, you have to go through the routine. Okay, so even though you've been here before, I always start even with returning guests, I start every episode, every interview with an icebreaker question just because I'm nosy and I want to find out more things about my guests. And so I went and looked at what I asked you last time to make sure I didn't ask that again. And then I went and trolled you on the internet a little bit. So what do I want to ask her about? And so one of the things I found really interesting was that you obtained your master's degree in computer science from New York University and then worked as a software developer for almost a decade before returning to school and earning another master's degree. Can we say high achiever? From the University of Washington in architecture. And so I started thinking, I don't remember talking to her about that before, but that's a pretty drastic career shift. Those are one is very analytical, one is very creative. What called you to architecture? What called you to make that polar shift in your career?
Yeah. No, I mean, architecture was what I wanted to study initially. So it was sort of a much older desire. When I was a teenager, I kind of decided that architecture was sort of this perfect intersection for me and captured, all the things I was interested in because I loved to draw. I was very much, artistic growing up, but I couldn't imagine, I wasn't necessarily interested in being an artist. And I loved science. I loved physics was my favorite topic. I loved chemistry. And it just seemed like this perfect, intersection between the creative and the kind of technical, analytical. It was a fit, but I just could not, when I was graduated from high school and was faced with the choice, of enrolling in an architecture school. I guess we should first preface this by saying that I was growing up in Niger, in West Africa, which meant that having the opportunity to, be sent thousands of miles away to study, in the US where the education is super expensive was not something that I took lightly, was something that I recognize as a privilege. And I could not bring myself to, you know, spend that money on a creative degree, at the time because I was just thinking, well, I probably won't be making much money coming out of school. This is going to cost a lot of money, both in debt and my family support. It just felt almost obscene. And I grew up in a family of engineers. So everything
Oh,
science was also the thing. My father was trained as a mathematician and a mining engineer. My mother is a chemical engineer. And so the sciences were everything, We couldn't even imagine. I don't think there was ever any conversation about anybody in the family studying something that was not scientific. It just was not, it's not an option. It's not something that we think about, even though my father is incredibly well read, reads, all kinds of different things. But then when it comes to the job you do, it had to be more serious. And that's what took me to computer science, not out of any kind of particular interest in computers, but it seemed like the reasonable and smart thing to do at the time. It was the late 90s. It was the beginning, of the computer boom. The internet was really sort of taking off and search engines and on all of that. And, I embarked on that, thinking that that was sort of the rational thing to do.
so where was the pivot? So
Hmm.
what made you just? I mean, obviously you went and you worked as a
Yeah.
software engineer. Um, and are your parents mad at you?
Oh, absolutely not. They're super excited. They never I never even brought it to them that I wanted to be an architect necessarily, right? So they had no role in my decision to not be an architect. And when I decided to study architecture, they were very excited because they also felt that it was a perfect fit for what I am, so to speak. The pivot actually happened as I was graduating from NYU. I didn't do it, but this is where I remember where I was when I discovered that you could earn a master's degree in architecture. I was just graduating and I could have done this master's in architecture even though I did not have an undergraduate in architecture. And most fields don't function this way. So essentially, I could have done it. I just didn't know it was possible. And I thought, well, it's too late now. I just finished this master's and I have to go and work. But it started just sort of, working in my mind. I just kept thinking, oh man, I wish I had done it. I wish I had done it. Um, and then a few years went by and I started thinking obsessively about architecture. I started buying architecture books. I was always having some kind of creative practice. I took up painting. I was doing a lot of things in my free time. But I started also thinking about architecture from a political point of view, from a historical point of view, from a identity point of view. Also reflecting on the place of architecture in countries such as mine, that have been colonized, that have been sort of shaped in a certain image, and that continue, to shape themselves in that image, and what that means, about agency, that you have on your own territory, in your own, environment. And it just started becoming this intolerable realization that we are essentially existing in a world where we're being told that we have no value, that there is no real architecture where we come from. There is no, but I knew that that was not true because I grew up in a place, and I think I shared it last time. I grew up in a place with really ancient architecture, hundreds and hundreds of years, still inhabited. These are not ruins, and there are spectacular monuments, of architecture. So I just needed to reconcile these things. And I reached a point where I just did not want to live in this world where this was the message I received. And I was very much invested in the idea of thinking through and practicing an architecture um, that that carried that kind of agency, that did justice to the place, it's being produced in, and that did justice also to its users, its inhabitants. It's because I recognize that architecture could be incredibly violent, and therefore it could also be incredibly healing. There's always two sides to the same coin. And I was interested. I think now I think about it, I was giving a lecture 3 weeks ago, and I finally realized that I always talked about it from a very negative point of view, with a lot of feelings of humiliation drove me to architecture, feelings of, wanting to transcend that. But now I'm realizing that what I was really after was a kind of repair. It was really looking for a language that will repair these feelings. So that's why I became an architect.
Creating a sense of space that doesn't make others feel that way.
Yes.
Why do I know I'm going to get the most profound answer on the planet when I ask you a question? I'm just listening to you, and so much of everything of what you said is so true, but I don't know that I've ever really looked at it from that perspective.
Hmm.
Architecture can
Yes.
be very violent.
It's,
I don't know
I've
that
experienced it mostly as that, in
yeah,
my life.
and to change that is such a lofty goal in the world that we live in, because it's not an easy place to be a lot of days, more so now, especially in the United States, than it ever has been before.
Mm.
But well, you have a total fan club here. Anything I can do to help you do that, here's your
Thank you.
girl. Let's talk about this project. How about
Yes.
we start with the client? Who is the client, and
Yes.
what were they looking for Gourmega to be? Like, what was
Yes.
I want to know the mindset of who
Uh,
came up with this idea, because it's amazing.
it's a crazy story. What an amazing client, one of my favorite clients on the planet at this point, who I met just sort of by chance because we had offices on the same floor in the same building.
Oh.
So we just ran into each other in the hallways, essentially. And one thing led to another. He asked me what I did. I told him I was an architect, and he came into the studio to see our work. And we were just finishing, the Rolex pavilion was under construction at the time, actually. And I was walking him through our process and about how the Rolex pavilion really represented this way we have of working, where we work in a hyper local manner, where it's really sort of this collaborative effort with local makers, in dialogue with the narrative and the history of a place, and kind of unearthing all of these different layers of a place. And also, by the way, by default, this is an approach that yields, incredibly sustainable outcomes, sustainable buildings, sustainable constructions by default through that kind of process. And he was really taken by that notion. And he really liked the idea of hyperlocality and embedding projects in their context in that way, not just in terms of research or theoretically, or ideas that you channel, but even from a construction point of view. That's something that really resonated. But he really also liked the idea that we always go through very rigorous research to excavate these stories, that a site carries, because a site is never blank. There's always been something that happened before. Even if it's never been built before, there are layers there to excavate. So he reached out to me right as I was in Venice for the inauguration of the Rolex Pavilion, and asked me to reach out to him the minute I come back to New York. He showed up in the office, whisked us away to this site, and he just said, "Listen, I have this small project. It might be too small for what you do, but hear me out, because I would love it if you could do this." And we arrive at this cafe in Soho in New York. And he announces he lets me know that this cafe has this massive industrial kitchen in the back. So we go through the kitchen, and it turns out that the kitchen produces the largest volume of meals for New Yorkers who might not be able to, have access to constant meals, or who might be unhoused, or or who have other types of vulnerabilities, and they produce 30,000 meals per week. And we went through and saw the prep area, all these volunteers who were in the kitchen. It was incredibly inspiring. And his idea, and this was completely his idea was to turn this cafe into a supper club, a really high-end supper club, in order for the proceeds to go towards the soup kitchen. And I just thought, where do I sign? So immediately, we were in contract the next day, and we started designing the next day. And then he said, "Oh, by the way, I need this to be designed and built in 3 months." And I thought,
Now you tell me.
and I think maybe because I was on a high, I just came back from Venice. I was very happy about the pavilion. Everything seemed really rosy. And I was also really exhausted, because every other project we have is taking 5 to 10 years, to come to life. I foolishly said yes, but I really said yes because I was so taken by the mission, and by the idea. And he said, "Well, I know that you spent 2 months, in research before you start building. Clearly, you can do that here. So, do your best." So we still went through the research, and all of that. But yeah, it was a sort of this crazy adventure. We did not deliver it in 3 months. It was 4 months. But, it happened.
Only, 4 months, really. You said 3 months, and I'm like, the only thing that popped into my head was impossible.
Yeah.
And then when you said we did not deliver in 3 months, I was expecting your next
It's like, of
sentence to
course
be, 18 months, not
No.
4 months.
4 months.
I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah.
4 months is crazy.
I loved the challenge of it, because I think, I have a way of thinking about construction that it's incredibly nimble. I don't believe in having to go through, all these, processes for supposedly delivering, a project where you end up having this package of 20,000 drawings. I don't think it's necessary. Definitely not for a project of this scale. Yes, if you're working on a big complex project, it's necessary because it's very complicated. You have to document extremely carefully. Everything has to be very clear. But I think we need to be able to be flexible, when you come across something like this. And the first thing we did with my team was sit down and make a plan for how we would deliver this. And we actually didn't mean to deliver it in 3 months. We were not thinking, well, it's not going to happen, we'll do our best. We were trying to deliver it in 3 months. And I think that's why we were able to do it in 4, in the end.
Well, kudos to you. There's a little history here. So, Gourmega stands in one of Manhattan's first Black neighborhoods with a history that influenced the design of this space.
Mhm.
Tell me a little bit more about that history and how it
Yes.
influenced the design, because I really love that piece. I really loved reading about that piece. So I'm going to let you. I already know, but I'm going to let you tell me
Yes.
about it.
I mean, this is what the research uncovered, right? This is why doing research is so important before you start designing. So even though we didn't have time, we still put at least 1 week in do a deep dive in Soho and the area. And immediately, what came to the surface was that the site was literally at the beginning, the line where the first settlement of newly free slaves, you know, sort of settled in New York when they arrived after they left the South. And we thought, well, this is perfect because the serendipitous aspect is that the client is a New Yorker, born and bred in Harlem, grew up in the Bronx, African American. He was very much interested in interweaving the narrative of Black people in New York in the project without knowing the history of this site, because we think of Soho as a very high-end neighborhood. You definitely don't think of it, as sort of an African American neighborhood or any other minority for that matter. And he was also very much interested in the intersection between African Americans and the larger Black diaspora and the African diaspora, and sort of the whole journey, of us as a people, and how he could capture that in this place through his food, but also how the architecture could speak to that somehow. So he spoke about his interest in West Africa, from a culinary perspective, but also in terms of inspiration, and also his interest in Egypt, and other sort of places on the continent that inspire him. And he was thinking about it also from a female perspective, which I thought was fascinating. He wanted a place, um, so he was very excited to hire a female architect for it also, for that reason. But he was coming from a mindset of thinking very hard about Black women, especially in America, and about what they have achieved, how they, having been raised, by a single mother, having had, the Black women in his life being sort of this pillar, and sort of the grounding um, force of his world, of his life. We started having this conversation about Black women as queens, just because of the sheer strength, um, and the Black queens in America. So we would talk about Nina Simone. We would talk about, so many different inspirational figures. Then we started talking about African queens, real queens who were warriors, who were, Queen Amina, Queen Zinga, so it started creating this constellation of 14 queens to match the 14 seats he wanted for this supper club, and almost sort of a conversation, but without doing anything overtly, without showing anything overtly. I started just thinking about ways this can be expressed in materiality. This could be expressed in the way that we think about light, that we think about hospitality, that we think about community, and just sort of, layered everything. But this was sort of the beginning, the first conversation we had. And then, the project went from there.
I love that. I did not know all of that. I thought I had this all figured out, but I did not know about that. I love it. Now I have to come, and we have to have dinner there. Um, you already alluded to it a little bit in the beginning, but this restaurant has a very, very unique business model.
Yes.
Give me a broad description of Gourmega, its relationship with Rethink Food, and how
Yes.
all that operates.
Yes. I mean, they're essentially two separate entities, but one is at the service of the other, right? I mean, they're at the service of each other. So Gourmega uses the kitchen that belongs to Rethink Food. So Rethink Food offers the kitchen for operations, and then Gourmega offers proceeds back to Rethink Food as well. And this came about because John, the client, is also on the board of Rethink Food. So this is how that was sort of his way of, contributing also to this organization that he champions and that he believes in. And it was just incredibly inspiring for me to hear. And I just thought it was such an incredibly original very smart idea. You know, it was very exciting to hear. But that's basically how it works. And the restaurant is open from Wednesday to Saturday. Oh, and I forgot that the other curveball, aside from the 3 months, as he was walking away, he just said casually, "Oh, and by the way, then also the supper club needs to be able to function as a cafe by day. Goodbye." You know.
As I'm walking out the door.
What do you mean? These are two completely different types of, these are different typologies altogether. But then I thought that was so exciting because I had no idea what that would mean or that would look like. But I was super excited by the challenge.
I'm trying to even picture how you go from cafe in the afternoon to high-end supper club. I mean, supper club, just those two words.
Yes,
And you're expecting to walk into rich leather and dark
exactly.
lights. And
Right.
well, we're going to find out. That is hilarious. That is hilarious. So Gourmega is in an old landmarked building.
Yes.
Tell me about the space. Describe what you had to start with and how
Yeah.
the existing space affected some of your design
Mm,
decisions. Because I know where there were some things in there that you had to like, okay, how can I
absolutely.
make
Yeah,
this
exactly.
work?
Yeah.
So
I
what
mean,
shape was it in, and what did you do there?
yeah, it was actually in great shape, thankfully. But there were two challenges. The first one was that it was incredibly small. Just kind of like, one of those really deep, long, narrow, cafes. And it was in the landmark building, to your point, so we couldn't touch the exterior, at all. So everything had to be inward looking, which was very disappointing for me because I had big ideas for the frontage, of this restaurant. But it's okay. Um, and so it was sort of trying to think about, and it had one central communal table, in the middle, even as a cafe. And this is what John also wanted. He wanted, the supper club to be around, these 14 seats around a rectangular communal table. And at the same time, you could see through to the kitchen from the cafe. There was sort of a glass wall, just kind of very simple, mullion glass partition, and that separated the cafe. So those two things, the seating for 14 people, communal table, and the glass, view through, um, became sort of the starting point from a design point of view. Number one, we quickly decided on the first day of the site visit that we wanted to keep this visual connection between the restaurant and the kitchen as a way, but we wanted to do it in such a way that it would be almost a worshiping act towards the kitchen somehow, you know. So that was the very first idea that came. Then I started thinking about this communal table because when he said, "Oh, this rectangular communal table, we could ever reuse this one," I immediately shut that down because when he said communal table, I got really excited because I had been thinking about communal tables and how I thought they were not communal at all. And being in restaurants, when people would say, "Oh, do you want to sit at the communal table?" I was like, "No, this is just uncomfortable. Like I don't see it doesn't make me want to sit next to other people." But also I was thinking about the typology of that rectangle, and the how embedded with so many social and status and hierarchical cues, actually, it is. How a rectangular table has embedded in it, a notion of your place, in sort of the pecking order, around that table. If there's no head of the table, you're towards the middle, the host is probably in the middle, the most important people are next to the host. And then if you find yourself towards the edges, then you know how little you matter. And I just always thought that it was such an incredibly brazen um, show of contempt. This. Why is that? How is this okay? How is it okay in the 21st century to sit people according to how important they are, or in a way that it makes it clear how much you value them or how little you value them, which then sends a message to everybody else around that table. It's a little bit humiliating, I think, if you happen to be on the edge of that table. And the reverse is also true when you're closer to the head of the table versus the middle, etc. So immediately I knew that I did not want to have, this kind of table. And that then led me to think about, what does eating in community mean? And then realizing that actually in most cultures around the world, people eat in community. People don't eat with just one plate by themselves. And even when they do, they congregate, and usually they place themselves in a circle. And obviously the circle is the perfect, equalizer. Everybody is at the same distance from one another. There's no hierarchy possible. So that really sort of started this, thought about, how we could then actually, we have to design a table. We were not tasked to design furniture, but we ended up designing every single piece of furniture in the space, on top of designing the space. And we ended up making this table that was just, 3 circles of different sizes, interlinked, and, sort of in a sinuous way, because I wanted to make sure that when you sat around that table, that you could see everybody simultaneously, and that you will always turn towards one another, not turn along, the edge from one another. That was just really important.
I don't think I ever thought about it that way before. I also hate communal tables in a
Yeah.
restaurant
Yeah.
or anywhere for that matter, because it really is. It's awkward. You're being seated with people you don't know to the side of you.
Right.
You're with whoever you're with
Immediately.
across from
Yeah.
you. You're right next to you. People you don't know. It being side by side with somebody is not a super conducive way. You have to turn away from who you're with to engage
Exactly.
if you want to even engage.
Right. It's an additional effort.
Yeah, it
Whereas
is.
here, yeah, some reports I got from people who have been to the restaurant was that they actually wanted to speak to people they didn't know, because they would hear pieces of the information because they were just around the circle together, and they end up just falling in conversation with each other. But also the circles have 3 different sizes, so there were varying sizes of intimacy that you could have. So someone was interviewing me last week who had been to the restaurant for his birthday, and he was telling me that they got one of the small circles because there were just 4 of them, and it was perfect. But at the same time, they really felt like he felt like he was celebrating his birthday with everybody, even though he didn't know them. And it ended up being this complete, total restaurant affair, where they did not feel like, he told me he felt his birthday was amplified, and all these people were actually celebrating actively, and I thought that was so interesting.
Yeah, just it being less linear.
Yes.
Just that curvature, I can see where it would make it far more comfortable
Yeah.
to engage with somebody that, I love meeting new people. But I'm not necessarily the person that will maybe make that first move if
Right.
I'm surrounded by people I don't know. But
Right.
that's just so genius. You just don't, you see, you have somebody explain something to you from their perspective, and I don't have I joke that I have the creative abilities of a toddler.
I doubt that.
I have a very analytical, very detail oriented mind, and I have discovered there's some creativity in there. I don't know that it would win any awards, but if you're enjoying it, it's creative. But when you have somebody else kind of tell you, and then you can, how they got there and what they were thinking. I love how you immediately said, no, that table goes.
Oh, yeah, I could not wait to figure out what a different version could be. And but it was also a good opportunity again to layer in other stories, right? And it was about the material of the table. I was still remembering what John was saying about West Africa and Egypt. So, we incorporate brass, we have natural stones, our, source from New York State or New Jersey, I'm forgetting, it's close by. We used alabaster, because alabaster is a material that was always used in sacred rituals, and jars and containers and um, like kind of ritualistic objects in ancient Egypt, for example. And then we had this glass door that opens onto the kitchen, but it was basically most of the money went into that door. It was just sort of this incredibly insane, 4.5 meter diameter, single pane glass door that swivel. It's round, it's orange, and it swivels 360 degrees. And so I was there for dinner, and it's extremely theatrical, and they really have incorporated that in the experience of the restaurant, where the door is always closed when you arrive, so you think it's just a source of light. It's the main source of light, so we call it the sun door. Again, Egypt, but also a lot of West African indigenous beliefs had sun worship is all over the continent in general. So that also was kind of the thread we were pulling there. And when you enter the space, it just feels like, there's just the sun. That's all you see. And then you have this table. It literally feels like the table is floating because the legs are black, the space is black, the table is floating and falling into the sun. That's all you see. And when it's time for service, they open this door, and usually people don't know that this is actual door, and that it opens and it swivels, and it's super theatrical, and they file in, with the plates to serve. I mean, it's just sort of this big moment, and then they actually tell the story of rethink food at that point, which is really beautiful. And we can talk about and show the kitchen, from the table. You had a direct line of sight into this kitchen, and it's the moment to really talk about that, and to talk about also the site, to talk about the restaurant, and then go on to talk about the food itself that people are being served. So it's turned into this incredible. Yeah, I just feel so fortunate to have been part of such a project. It's been wonderful.
I have to say, when I first got the information on the project and I was reading through and looking at those pictures, I absolutely fell in love with that door immediately. It's like it drew me more than anything else. It just
Yes.
drew me. I can't wait. I normally have my pictures open when I'm doing an interview, and I forgot to open them, but I can't wait to go back and look at all of them again after all this input from you. Because I hadn't
It
thought of
was
it as a
really,
sun, but I thought that's one of the most unique things I've seen in a really long time. I
yeah.
mean, and
It's
just
it's a sun,
amazing.
and it's part of that kind of, this way of also kind of worshiping this kitchen and its noble deeds, for so many families in New York, and elevating it to the most important, you know, aspect of this space
Well, then it
is the
swings
kitchen.
open and the abundance comes out of
Exactly.
it. I
Exactly.
have to go to this place. I have to go to this place. So with your whole 4 months that you had, what did your because you did a lot in a very, very short period of time. So I know your planning and programming process
Yes.
was what, on the fly? I mean, what did that look? You must have had a
Yeah.
really great client that you could get down to decisions very quickly.
Oh, he loved everything we said. So there was no back and forth. We just literally, we would invite him over, this is the research, this is what he said. It's like, oh, that's amazing. Okay, cool. No problem. Go. There
Well,
was there
that
was never any
okay.
pushback, so that helped. Um and then the other aspect was that he knew these twin contractors, twin brothers, who he's working with on another project, and they run a design build firm. So we told him we should use them, definitely, because if we have a design build firm, we can deliver this in 3 to 4 months. Because what that allows us to do is to go through concept quickly, start developing, the design, and actually start demolition at the same time. And they finish the shop drawings. And we were demolishing and designing at the same time. And by the time they were done with demo, it was time for shop drawings. it was very simple. Also, the design is very, very simple. If anything, I made the space, which was already narrow, even narrower, because it had a few nooks and crannies, and I completely closed them off, turned them into hidden storage, compartments, flush with the wall and all of that, because I wanted to make it a completely concentrated, immersive experience. Because I find restaurants too often distracting. There's too much going on. There are too many things to look at. There are too many different light fixtures and decorations and this and that. It's just too much going on. And I wanted to create the feeling, again, thinking about community. When you enter the space, you completely forget about the world. Because how else are you going to turn towards one another? How else are you going to want to have conversations because you're not thinking about anything else? And then the other thing is that I realized very quickly, if I make the space completely black, and the black came also from the fact that we discovered that 2 blocks away was the very first black and tan club, um, where African Americans and other races can come, together. And, we know about the black and tan clubs all over America. And so it was also a little bit cheeky that, the space inside was, the colors are also black and tan. But the nice thing about making the space dark, I was thinking to myself, when you enter the space, it's really dark, it's really moody. When you reach for your phone, which is what everybody does when in a restaurant, even when they're with each other, you're going to turn on your phone, it will blind you. The light of your phone will be so aggressive that it will be undesirable, to be on your phone. That was also another thing I was thinking.
I once again am seeing this project in a completely different light as you kind of walk me through each of these pieces. But so I just this last weekend, I went to my annual Mother's Day weekend with my family up at the lake.
Nice.
And they're fairly rustic cabins. I mean, you have a bathroom and a kitchen, but they're fairly rustic. But one of the reasons we go to this place every year is for the lack of distractions. So up until this year, which we were not happy about, we just cut it off. They didn't have any Wi-Fi. There were no TVs in the cabin. They didn't allow motorboats on the lake. You could only have rowboats or kayaks. And so we come up there. I go up there with my kids and my grandkids and my daughter-in-law's family. A bunch of them come. And we have no choice but to spend time with each other, to talk to each other, to play games. I had a 4-hour music trivia contest with my oldest son. We had so much fun. That's what you have going on here. I'm a minimalist anyway, so the more minimalist it is, the more I'm going to love the space. But I never thought about that. I had dinner with my youngest son last night, and we were in this restaurant, dumpling restaurant, and it's pretty minimalist, but it's really loud. Yeah. And that part bothered me. I'm like, why don't they put some acoustic something up? This is driving me insane. But there was a lot of distraction, a lot of stuff going on, lots of people in and out of the kitchen.
Right.
And even though the dinner was amazing, that detracted from the experience. You couldn't settle. Yes. You couldn't focus on what you were there to do, spend time together.
Yeah.
I'm going to go paint my dining room all black now.
Honestly, I've actually been trying to figure out how to channel this into my own dining space. But, excuse me, I was also thinking about the fact that when I was growing up, when we ate together communally, we ate on the ground, and there would be a round mat. There was always this round mat that would be placed. It could be round or sometimes even rectangular, but we'll always form a circle around, the kind of main dish to eat it. But again, it's just simple. You created a dining area by just placing by where you place the mat. That's all. And that's all you need.
Right. And so then what are you focusing on while you're having your meal? Each other.
Yeah. It's just, and in a way, these discs, this table that seems to be floating is almost like my mat, to some extent. And that's all you need. You have each other, you have the food, and you have, a place to place the food on. We're done. You know.
So I cannot wait to get back into these. I did research also actually what after reading your project description on black and
Mm,
tan
yes.
establishments and I learned a lot just by doing the research
Mm,
on that area of Soho before it was
yes.
Soho that we hear
Mm-hmm.
about in all the celebrity magazines.
Exactly.
Um, so New York is, and maybe it's earned, maybe it's not, but for those of us that are all the way on the other side of the country, New York is a place where we have the impression that it's really hard to get permits. Getting anything built in the city is very difficult.
Right.
Um, so we already know that your owner understood just defer to the queen. Is that what you did with the building department? How did
No, I don't have that kind of power. I wish.
how did that I mean how'd that process go with getting any permits that you had to get in such a short period of time?
We did. And it was really about understanding exactly what the rules are. And, and we did hit a few snags, especially when it comes to sprinklers. Sprinklers are like the bane of my
Oh,
existence. Oh,
everybody's.
it almost ruined my design so many times. Um, but then, in the end, I mean, that literally, we spent so much time on trying to figure out how to not, because I was having a drop ceiling to fully, because there was this massive HVAC, sort of conduit that ran the whole length. And clearly I had to hide it. But then it was going to, kind of hide away the sprinklers, and all of that. But then, I ended up I just painted everything black. In the drop ceiling, I was able to, avoid closing the sprinklers, and all of that. But I think it was just about understanding exactly what are the most important rules that can um, jeopardize permitting, and make sure that we respect those absolutely, so that we submit our permit and it's no big deal. Inspector comes in, checks, done. And that was that. But I think, again, practicing on the African continent was incredibly useful. I've discovered, working on this project, that building in New York is not dissimilar to building on the African continent, most for the following reason. It has all these rules, all these permitting issues, which we don't have at all. However, well, and also as a result, it requires you to be incredibly inventive to solve problems. Same thing on the continent. You have to be incredibly inventive to solve other types of issues, like, lack of access to certain types of materials, or, having kind of limited set of skills, to draw from, et cetera, et cetera. So you have to be very nimble, in your thinking, and just a very good problem solver. And I just realized that it was a good training. Working in Africa ended up being good training for working in New York, ironically.
Thank goodness, because that's not when I interview architects from New York,
Yeah.
that's typically a different answer, a different conversation that
But
I
I think
can.
it's because this is a small project also. I think my answer will be vastly different on a larger project. But most of the time, I think, rather than fighting a system, I think it's also a mindset. Rather than fighting a system, I always trying to figure out how to operate within it. And rather than sort of bemoaning not being able to deliver my full vision, say, because the system is getting in the way, I try to learn what the system is so that I can make sure the decisions I make are already sort of within reasonable bounds of that. And then I can just go. So it's a kind of it's a different type of scarcity to some extent, because it's about limitations. And I think, actually, in the end, that this is what I'm saying. I'm so used to working within limitations, and sometimes extreme limitations, that, the sort of permitting, environment, the permit heavy environment of New York, I approach it in this way. It's just another limitation, just like all the other limitations that I'm used to. Mm.
Well, that turned out to be a valuable experience.
Yes.
So we talked about how you did the table, but I'm a little enchanted by how that seating configuration changes from
Yes.
day to night. Because you've
Yes,
got
I forgot
two
about that.
different, well, good, because I have a question about it. So now we can cover it.
Yes.
So tell me about that.
Mm.
And I mean, you've
Well,
already explained why you do the evening communal seating, but how does it change from day to night? And why didn't you just do the same thing?
yeah. Well, from day to night, I just really wanted it to feel like a cafe. So that factor in our chair design, number one, because this was a place for queens. We started by making these thrones almost. We have 40 different 3D printed, versions of this chair. And then we ended up landing on a language that was just incredibly simple but beautiful, with these amazing curves, two circles, and two curved legs. Um, because they also felt like cafe chairs, but at the same time they had the luxury of a high-end, restaurant. So that was one aspect in it kind of mitigating these two languages. But then the really important aspect was that we made the table come apart. So the table actually turns into 5 different pieces that are completely irregular, of various sizes. They make no sense geometrically, and I love the idea of arriving at a cafe and sitting around a table that doesn't look like a table at all. And it just looks like two pieces of, stone kind of haphazardly slapped together. There was something that was very attractive about that. So I wanted the cafe experience to be a different kind of spectacle. And the spectacle was in the form of the chairs and how you would sit around them as a result, you know, in the space. And then the space would be fully rearranged, just like a cafe with seats of 2, 3, up to 5 people.
That is just such an interesting idea to take one space. And we were just talking about this restaurant with my son last night in Seattle.
Mm.
It's a fried chicken place.
Mm.
Something Supply, Chicken Supply, some weird name like that. But and so he was describing to me that they've been wanting to try it for a long time. It's in their neighborhood. They were living in Boston before that, and so they're still exploring the neighborhood. And he was telling me that they're only open from like noon to 4 every day.
Mm.
And but they're only open till 4 if they don't run out of chicken. But when they run out of chicken, they
Wow.
close.
They just close.
And
Right.
so sometimes they're closed by 1:30 in the afternoon because apparently this place is wildly popular.
Wow.
And I'm my initial gut reaction, just right off the top of my head, without putting any intelligent thought into it, is that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
It's a very American reaction.
Well, it is. It is. I really try to control that.
It's like you're leaving money on the table. What do you mean?
But then my analytical brain kicked in, and I started thinking, wait, if you're only open 4 hours a day, that's a lot less labor you're paying all day.
Yes.
You're only serving one thing. I think they have a couple of little sides, but it's mainly what's supposed to be this delicious fried chicken, which I love fried chicken. And I'm like, okay, you're only serving one thing. So you can cook that in bulk because you don't have a lot of fancy things to do. You probably can do that with less people. You're creating this, I have to have that environment with the people around because you close and you don't get chicken that day, no matter how bad you wanted it. And they might close at 1:00. They might be open till 4. And all of your expenses, if you're only open 4 hours a day, except for the cost of the building, is 4 hours a day.
Yeah.
They may work 8 hours a day. 4 hours might be spent preparing the chicken, which I'm sure they have down to an art. But I started thinking all the different ways this is saving money, and they've got people lined up every single day because they can't just, Americans are so used to, I can have whatever I want whenever I want it.
Whenever I want. Yes.
And we're really entitled, and we get really pissy
Right.
if we want something and we can't have it. And then we get competitive. It's like, okay, I want that. I can't have it. So tomorrow I'm going to be there at 8:00 in the morning because I'm going to be first in line and I'm getting my chicken, no matter how stupid that is. But at the end of the day, as I'm working all this kind of, how do you make that work in your head? By the end of the day, I'm going, these people are geniuses. They have figured out how to take this, not kill themselves running a business 18 hours a day. And they're probably making money if they hand over fist because they can't even stay open the 4 hours they're supposed to be open. And having that forethought to take a space and how can I maximize this space, have it do what it needs to do or make the money it needs to make without, going into debt or pouring money into it or pouring, having to have tons and tons of people to make it. And it seems like, obviously in a completely different way, that's exactly what they've done here.
Yeah.
In Gourmega, you can have this more casual cafe in the afternoon and get your coffee or your sandwich or whatever it is they do in the cafe during the day.
Exactly.
And then go put those pieces together and turn down the lights. And all of a sudden you're in this very rich, deep space with a completely different experience.
Yeah.
Without how much work, a person or two to put the tables back together and take them apart each day.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, one person can do it. You just slide them around, and that's all. So it works. It works pretty well. But I mean, the other aspect also is that going back to the construction, the realities of it, it's like we had a tiny budget also to do this, right? And the reason why that matters, it's like that it's in direct contradiction with the brief that wants a high-end restaurant. So I had to ask myself, what does high-end mean, really? Is it because we are investing in incredibly expensive materials and cladding it with just this super expensive way? Or is it in the intent and in the design and in the way that you express it? So it was a wonderful exploration of that question as well. And the whole space was resurfaced, clad and sort of streamlined to create this immersive experience with just OSB panels, which is even cheaper than plywood. And we didn't even sand it down. We actually loved the texture of the OSB. And it's cheap as hell. And it's not about that. It's still a luxurious experience because it allowed me actually to really think through. I'd written an essay for a book that came out a few months ago about beauty in architecture. And I titled my essay, The Injustice of Beauty in Architecture. And one of the injustices is that we have now equated beauty with luxury in architecture. Usually when you say that a space is beautiful, and when you say that it feels lush and rich, it usually means incredibly expensive stones and velvets and, leathers, and all of those things, right? But it's not really about the design or the spatial, that what you imagine, as the spatial, almost like aura, that you're creating necessarily. It ends up being about bells and whistles and things that you get from a catalog. And I had been thinking that, but I had never been, and I had, operated within that kind of thinking, on the African continent, but I was never faced with that outside of the African continent with a tiny budget, just like, when I'm in Africa. But you have to still make an incredibly dignified and sort of elevated experience in spite of it. And I have to say that it's one of the most gratifying outcomes of this space has been testing out, whether it's possible to do. Am I really right in this thing that I've been claiming for the past, over a decade, related to architecture? Is it true that it doesn't have to cost? Is that beauty and sort of this feeling of luxury is not about money, actually?
Well, and it's funny, and I'm going to ask you something else about that in a second, but I'm thinking, okay, what makes me, I've been to some of the nicest restaurants and I've been to some of the biggest hole in the walls you've ever seen. But I respond very emotionally to things. I'm an emotional person. So for me, it's all about the experience, the feeling I had in the space.
Exactly.
I remember one of the interviews I did, it was on a cocktail bar in New York. And I'm like, these cool geometric shapes you have on the wall, these leather geometric shapes. And this was a design build firm. And he kind of laughed and he said, those aren't leather, those are plastic. And I'm like, no, stop. I'm gonna go zoom in on this picture. And it was supposed to be like a Mad Men era cocktail bar, which they very much achieved. But I was convinced that they had these leather geometric shapes on the wall, and that's what they look like, but it's plastic.
Right.
Same thing. They wanted to create an environment, but they didn't have the budget, nor did they want to spend that kind of money. Right. But for me, it's about the feeling. How did I feel when I walked out? How was my experience there? How was the service? How good was the food?
Right.
And I think all those other things may or may not contribute. They may distract, like you said. Too much going on. I don't want too much going on. I want it to be all about what's happening right here, why I'm here with the person I'm here with.
Exactly. And it's about also being able to identify what are the things that makes a place, feel special. You were talking about the door and the table. Well, that's 70% of our budget went into those two things. That's where all the money went. So it's about also choosing where the money goes.
Right. But it's so cool and so interesting. You didn't need anything else.
Yeah.
So you said you went to, I have to ask this before we get to the next question. You said you went to dinner there. It's open and running now. So how's that going? And how did it, when you, I know you're going to be a little biased, obviously. It's your project. But I also have spoke with you enough now, and I feel like gotten to know you enough that I also know that you're probably overly critical of yourself and your work. And I think that there are people who can step back from themselves and go, okay, I'm going to come in here like I didn't do this project and just experience it. So how did you feel when you went to eat dinner there?
I felt many things. Number one, I was always taken aback by people's reaction to the space. It was always very extreme in a way that I just honestly didn't expect. At the same time, within half an hour, I realized I made a massive mistake. You said something earlier, acoustics. Oh my goodness. Here's the problem. People talk to each other so much. Like the whole being in community and talking to one another thing worked too well. The sound is deafening. People are talking so actively, so animately that I should have thought if you want to create a space where people are chatting this much, you should think about the acoustics. And I did not think about that at all. And that's a big weakness of the space, I have to say. And I want to talk to John later. I'm going to give him some time to kind of calm down because it's been very active.
Right.
And to see what we can do about that, because it's really loud. Well, it can be, not all the time, but it can be quite loud, especially towards the end of the evening when people are getting extra happy.
Well, but I think what you just said is the sign of a really good architect. I mean, I think every architect I know picks apart their work, and this could have been different. That I think a hallmark of, because there is no perfect project ever. You don't always have the budget to do all the things you'd like to do, or
Yeah.
like you said, there's
No, I didn't
you
think
you
about it,
didn't expect
honestly.
people
I
would
just did
respond
not,
in the way
and I
they
just
did.
didn't think about, no, but it's a rookie mistake also. I just did not think about the acoustics, and I'm not ashamed to say it. It's just one of those things. I just didn't think about it. We were just, our attention was elsewhere.
Well, with
You know,
14 seats, I
I
don't
thought
know
it
that
would
I would
be
have.
fine.
I mean, I
Yeah,
complain about restaurants being too loud all the time, but
yeah,
I don't know if I've ever dined in a restaurant that only had 14 seats. Like, I don't know that it's
right,
something I would have even thought about, because how loud can 14 people be?
right.
Apparently
Oh,
pretty
very loud.
loud. But that
Very
means they're
loud
having a good
because they're
time.
all talking to each other. That's the thing. They were all talking to each other. People are talking across, circles. Across, it's incredible.
Well, I'm sure you'll get it where you want it. But outside of it being loud,
Yes,
did it have the feel that you wanted it to have?
it really did. To be honest, I was quite pleased. Um, I think I was a little bit self-conscious about the OSB, even though I was, unapologetic about it. I was worried that it would be judged harshly or like, yeah, especially within our community, right? Um, but no. And I think the table and the door suck up all the energy that you don't see anything else. And the other feature that I really also want to highlight is that within the OSB panels, because also full disclosure, going back on cost and all of that, we didn't start out wanting to make a OSB clad interior. We wanted to have this super amazing charred Japanese wood, charred black charred. um, Obviously that blew up the budget. So, that, and we tried so hard. We tried to figure out different ways to sources, way to do it ourselves, to chart ourselves. I mean, we tried everything. There was just no way we could make it, within the budget. So we ended up doing the OSB. But then, we kind of carved these little niches because, again, as we're layering all these different aspects of culture and history and, sort of Afro-American, sort of layers and African layers, um, I was also thinking about the kind of metals, that are. So it was just really sort of about thinking about these materialities. So we invited this incredible designer, Nifemi Bello, from Nigeria, to contribute these little bronze plaques, because in West Africa, bronze is something that has been um, worked and into all kinds of different very intricate objects. I mean, the Benin bronzes are always being talked about, for example, but it's something that is in the maker heritage of West Africa for over 1,000 years. It's been, blacksmithing and bronzesmithing, just metal work in general has a very deep history. And I really wanted to incorporate that here. And so I ended up falling in love with this mix between this, handmade, unique bronze pieces on this OSB, you know, wall, on this cheap OSB wall. And the bronze pieces that Nifemi created were these facial scarifications of Yoruba people, in abstracted, and kind of etched in this bronze. And I thought that was just so beautiful. And after we had to do the OSB, then I was sent back to, again, the origin, the reason why I'm so proud of it now, the origin of the neighborhood itself. Well, at the time when Black people settled there, they just made do with whatever they had. For a long time, there were just tents. People just lived in tents, and then slowly started making shacks, and then slowly started making buildings. And there was something about, the material, a material such as OSB, that you're not even supposed to see. It's supposed to be in the back of things, being shown. That to me was another nod at that layer, of that history. And so then it just became one of the most special things for me in that project.
I wouldn't have thought about that, but and I probably wouldn't even see it because I just feel
Yeah,
the
probably.
space. I
Yeah,
probably
no,
wouldn't even notice. But
you wouldn't.
um, outside of that, I think it also helps kind of keep it humble.
Yes.
It's been a journey, and
Yes.
it wasn't always an easy road, and everything wasn't always perfect, and it
Yeah,
so that feels more truthful. It feels more
I
authentic.
agree. I
Yeah.
agree. I'm actually glad we were not able to do what we wanted to do in the beginning. This is so much better.
Let's talk about construction for a minute. So you got
Yes.
these twin brothers, design build
Yes.
firm.
Yeah.
Um, very, very,
They're
very
amazing.
short project in a very, very dense city.
Yes.
Um, and there's always some kind of fun. There's a little bit of sarcasm there. Some kind of fun in the construction phase. Tell
Mm.
me about the construction phase and how that went, especially in such a compact schedule. I did not
Mm-hmm.
realize you did this in 4 months. I'm still, my brain's still trying to catch up here.
No, I
How
mean,
did that work? And did they help him? You said they came on a little early, so did they help inform your
yes.
design as you were designing, so that you didn't have to, that change order down the road? Um,
No, they did the shop drawings, so that really helped. But the thing, I mean, it was actually effortless. I'm sorry to say, I was really spoiled on this project. I know, I know, I know. It's really impossible to believe. It was completely effortless. We saw eye to eye immediately. But again, because I have such a deep experience at this point working with makers and contractors and sort of other kinds of builders where it's always a collaboration. It's not adversarial relationship. It's always a collaborative relationship, and I was open to suggestions from them always, and they felt that from the beginning. And so whenever we would hit a roadblock, they felt that they could make a suggestion. I might, shut it down and be like, no, this will ruin my design or something like that. But we could brainstorm together, you know, to solve the problem. And they ended up just feeling also invested, in the project because we were figuring it out together. And they're incredibly talented. The firm's name is Twam. I want to shout them out. Basim and Wasim are the names, and you can tell them apart. I mean, towards the end, I could tell them apart. But they're also a team that they're designers. They get it, and we also have our design sensibilities actually match, which was by luck. We didn't know this, starting to work with each other, but we were a complete match from a design sensibility point of view. And I think also we had a certain cultural proximity that was helpful. They're originally from Egypt. And so there was sort of, a certain kinship and a sort of kind of recognition. There was a certain way that we understood how to speak to each other and how to navigate this together. It was really effortless. And it was very much like when I'm on my construction sites in Niger. It took me back. It was sort of magical, you know. And I don't know if it's gonna happen again in other projects with another type of contractor, but I feel so I'm so grateful that I did here.
well, I think it's a perfect lesson for all of us. Um, so often, you talked about the hierarchy at the table.
Mm.
So often on the projects we do, obviously every project we do is a team environment,
Mm.
but so often there's a hierarchy.
Yes.
I'm the architect, so
Right.
architects can have a little bit of ego, but
Definitely.
builders can also be really stubborn, and all you architects are stupid. And
Yes.
I mean, there's our environment that we work in on a day-to-day basis isn't always as collaborative as it's supposed to be. But
I
then you
agree.
just put a shining example of putting those two, particularly those two factions in a room.
Mm.
And from the get go, approaching it with mutual consideration, mutual respect. It's
Mutual
amazing when
respect.
you put ego outside the door. And look what
Exactly.
happened.
But it was the exact same experience with the Rolex Pavilion. We walked away from this. It went without a hitch. And it was, again, very collegial. We're cracking jokes on the site. We're trying to, if I see something, executed particularly well, we celebrate it. If there's a problem, we talk about it. But again, you're not coming at it from a place of anger or condescension, of or disrespect. You are coming, at least I think you should. We come from it from a place of just, we want to solve the problem. We want to make the best project possible. For me, when I'm making a project, the project is not about me. Of course, there's a vision that I want to make sure we deliver. It's about the project. So anything that will serve the project, I'll be open to,
Well, see, you're not going to say it, but I'm going to say it. Seems to me that your approach is what brings everybody to the table. That mindset that you have, that it's not about me, it's about the project, which it should always be about. And I know it.
Right.
It's about the project for everybody, but you really truly put that ego outside the door. You're going to get the project you've promised to deliver. But just the way you talk to people, I mean, I adored you 5 minutes after meeting you the first time. I told you before we started this interview, I want to go hang out with her. I could listen to her talk about this stuff all day long. And so you should continue, because I'm very big on mentoring. You need to continue sharing that mindset and that gift, because it does resonate. People around you are soaking that in, even if they don't tell you that, or they're sitting there thinking, maybe I could be more like her.
Thank you.
So I'm just saying that maybe this success in seamless construction, which nobody ever says, is a direct result of how you deal with people and how you make them feel when you're working with them.
I'm telling you, I was in Venice, completely different, and that was much more complex in terms of different intersections of people, contractor, woodworkers, glassmakers, all of that. Nothing. There was never one moment where we had a problem,
Maybe you make that easy. I mean, I really believe that. I think if you have a leader in anything you do, not just our business, in anything you do, if you have that person that can bring everybody together, to make everybody feel safe, because isn't that what we all do as human beings? The people we're attracted to are the people that make us feel safe. That this is a safe place to be. I can be me, or I can have a conversation here and know I'm not going to be judged or whatever. It's the same thing on a project. And,
I completely agree. And I think it's also because for me, it's not the project, the outcome is only one of the things. It's not the main thing. The process matters to me immensely. The journey to the finished product is incredibly important. That's why I'm so invested in who is actually building, and again, with Gourmega, it was hyper local. Everybody was local. The artists, aside from Nifemi, who's in Nigeria, but he actually also practices in New York. We made space for also local art. The space will be created every quarter with new set of artists from Harlem, from the Bronx, from all over the boroughs in New York, brought into it. The twins, have a workshop in Brooklyn. We just call them the twins.
I love that.
In Brooklyn, and unfortunately, the one thing that happened was that as we were in construction and we were done with all of the work of the space itself, and we were finishing we were about to start the furniture, their warehouse burned down. Yeah. Their warehouse burned down, and it was just, and that set us back a couple of weeks. That's like the only thing that, that's the only thing that happened. But we didn't care that we were being set back. We were worried for them. We reached out. We wanted to see how we could help, because by then we had already become family, and we were offering office space if they needed, or something like that. Just what could we do? And I think that's what it's about, right? And for them, they were really worried for us for this project. They went above and beyond to minimize the discomfort, to the project, the harm to the project. We got really lucky that the wood they had just cut for the chairs, because they made also all the furniture. They're amazing furniture makers as well. I mean, yeah, they're so wonderful. I love them. It was wonderful. Um, Everybody should work with them. Anybody listening to this podcast, look them up, work with them. Um, and yeah, they had just cut this wood, and it was in someone else's warehouse where they used their tools to cut the wood. So that's what saved the chairs. And the table hadn't been fully assembled yet, but they lost everything, you know.
That's
But we all rallied, including John, and everybody was just trying to figure out how we could help. Yeah. But at the same time, as the project was under construction, I think this goes back to what you were saying about, mutual respect. But you also have to be generous towards one another and not turn this, you all working towards a common goal. So I don't understand, the kind of the adversarial um, nature of construction sites often. We were filming in the space while it was under construction because there was a documentary, that we were in, and like we insisted, like I really wanted them to be also part of it because they were doing this amazing work. But this is also something that we do when we work with makers and masons, and contractors in Africa as well. If there's going to be an interview, if there's going to be an institution coming from some, like it was I think it was the UN who was doing a documentary for, a small film they wanted to make on my work in sustainability. But we're talking about economic sustainability, and sort of all of these like hyper localism as a way of achieving sustainability. And I was really interested in their point of view because they hadn't really worked, on projects from that perspective. And I asked them if they would, you know, be happy to be interviewed, for it. And they were, and they're in the film. So I think it's really about making sure that this idea of common goal and that it's about the project is just manifested in a real way. And it makes for much better executed projects also. So even selfishly, you should do it even selfishly.
well,
The outcome is always wonderful because everybody wants it to succeed.
right. I've always said at the end of the day, no matter what it is you're doing in life, it's all about the people.
It really
It's all
is.
about the relationships. All the other things are going to come together or not the way that they're going to,
Yes.
come down the pipe. But those people, like you said, like they're family. They're family to
They
you
really
now.
are.
Know,
Yes.
and there's nothing that replaces that, which kind of leads to my next question. Um, I was after our first interview in the Rolex Pavilion, I was really blown away at how you take every last tiny little aspect of the projects that you work on, the care and the research and the
Yeah.
heart you put into your projects is, I mean, I've met a lot of passionate architects, but it's really kind of unparalleled the level that you take it to. Where does that heart come
Oh,
from?
thank you.
Like
Um,
what was your influence that made you so empathetic and so, kind of seeing beyond the materials
yeah.
into the holistic view that you have?
But I think it is probably because of the way and the reason I became an architect. Because it was coming from this place of hurt to some extent, right? And I was looking for, a certain form of, yeah, as I was saying earlier, repair. But repair has to be very carefully done. You have to put a lot of care in it. Like if you really mean it, that it's not just about the way a building looks and that it's beautiful and that it needs to do more than that, because that's literally the mission that you're embarking on. Then you have to pay close attention to so many different things. That's why the research is so important. That's why knowing all these layers about a site and a history and the people is so important. Because otherwise, how do you then sort of infuse the project with these different dimensions? And unless you infuse the project with these dimensions, how do you repair? Because how do you even know what needs repairing? Right. And even when I teach architecture, this is sort of, I force this research process on all my students. And I tell them it's a way of uncovering the research. It's not just about learning, you know, data points, and facts and things about a place. It's about uncovering vulnerabilities. And those vulnerabilities can take many different shapes and then can be catered to in many different ways. They can be catered to through the design. They can be catered to through who gets to build it. They can be catered through to who you collaborate with, et cetera, et cetera. So then you have all these different layers that happen. And it's effortless to figure out how to put this together once you have identified the vulnerabilities, once you've excavated, you know, the sort of soul of this whole thing, not to be, poetic about it, right?
No, but it is
And then
it
it
is
becomes
poetic.
automatic. Well, because then actually then it happens almost effortlessly, like automatically. I don't have to strain, honestly, to add these layers because all of those ideas come from that initial work. If you do that work in a serious manner, not in a performative manner,
Right.
and not in a disconnected manner, meaning you're just looking at materials, you're looking at history, that's important. It's not enough. It always has to go way beyond that.
But when you do that, what you do is you create real repair. You didn't just
I
fix the
hope so.
building.
I hope so.
You fix the people in that building. You've made, or maybe not fixed them, but you've created a place that is headed in a different direction and more healing and maybe changing the course of what it could have been before because you took it to that level.
I mean, that is the hope,
Yeah.
right? And the hope is that also you see something of yourself in the space that is for you. So what does it mean? And again, for me, that was very important practicing in Africa. I think that's why, it's so embedded in me now as a way of practicing architecture. It was very important for me that a 15-year-old come to a museum or a cultural center and feel like this place is not just that you have the right to be here. No, like that bar is too low. And I feel like that's the bar we usually have, and we pat ourselves on the back, for that. That bar is too low. In that context, I need that 15-year-old. I want that 15-year-old to feel themselves in it, to feel like this space is about them, not just that they have permission to be.
Right.
Permission.
Yeah, we won't even go into that conversation.
That's too little of an ambition.
Yeah, exactly. Like somebody's doing you a favor.
Exactly.
Yeah,
it's very condescending.
That does. Yeah, and that's hurtful. That is violent architecture. That is damaging.
I remember designing a project and doing a series of workshops so I always do these workshops with young people, cultural projects. I always do workshops with young people between ages 16 and 21. It's my sweet spot that I discovered over the years. That's my age bracket. And, I would have all kinds of conversations with them. We'll just talk about all kinds of things. It's not even about architecture at all, ever. And they were the first ones I showed the project that came from our conversations. They were the very first eyes, that I showed the project to. And I'll never forget, one of them looked at me very confused. And she said, like, you mean for this to be built here? And I said, yes. It's like, but like here in Niamey, like we would be able to go in this, something that's like this. And I said, yes. And she was just completely overwhelmed by that thought. And it completely broke my heart. Because I was thinking, we put so little care in how architecture makes people feel, or whether they sort of, like it's so performative. It's so about, making a statement. And this building that it was completely a statement building. I absolutely wanted it to be iconic. I absolutely wanted it to be, it's very grand. But it was not intimidating at all. And they felt, and it was complete, everything was going to be done by local masons, every technique, but it was very, like, imposing. And I asked her why she was, what it was that she was feeling. Then it's like a therapy, turned into a therapy session. And she just said, like, I don't know. It feels almost wrong. Like we're not supposed to have this.
And that's ingrained. It's ingrained from centuries of living in an environment where you have to have permission.
This.
Yeah.
The whole world tells you this. Right.
Well, you keep knocking that wall down.
No, but it's just sort of I feel like as architects, we maybe sometimes we think too much of our buildings as objects rather than what would be the word that would be not an object? Rather than kind of manifestations. And even though we don't think of them as manifestations, they are. They impact you. The spaces impact you, the building impact you for, positively or negatively or neutrally, whatever. There's an impact. So why wouldn't we want to actually think about the kind of impact we're making when we make a building? And by impact, I don't mean impressing.
No, I know exactly what you mean. The word that came to my head as you were searching for yours was influence.
Yes.
Every space I'm in influences me. It influences my mood. It influences whether I'm relaxed or stressed.
Yeah.
Whether I feel like I belong there. We didn't have much growing up. I think we talked about this a little bit the last time we talked. And so I wasn't until a much older age exposed to some of these, privileged kind of environments and people that were not spaces I would have felt welcome in as a young person, not spaces I could walk into and feel comfortable or see any part of the life I had, at least at that point. And so, I don't ever pretend to have walked anybody else's path. But, we've all had our path, and being a woman, there's other, aspects is like this. Clearly still we fight it on a daily basis. Why can't I go to a concert and buy a t-shirt that will fit me? Right. Why do they always have to be men's t-shirts? It's a stupid thing, but there's all these things in our spaces that matter if you actually step out of your own shoes for a minute and try to experience that space as someone who's not you. And if you don't have enough knowledge or experience to do that, then bring somebody in to help you experience it from their shoes. It's going to change your mindset. But we really don't see a ton of that.
I mean, it changes your mindset. It changes how you see yourself. It tells you something about your own value. Because if it intimidates you, it's putting you down.
Right.
If it exhilarates you and at the same time you feel like, it reflects your own identity, your own thoughts, it gives you dignity. And architecture does that. So why shouldn't we lean into that?
And I hope all you people out there listening are paying really close attention, because this is the most important thing you're hearing. This whole entire year, this is the most important thing you're hearing right now, because it does matter. It does empower. It either puts down or lifts up. And there is some control as architects you have over that happening. Before we get to our two closing questions, I'm making zero apologies for going over time. When the producers get cranky with me, I don't think they will, because they loved your last interview. Before we get to our two closing questions, tell me what you're working on now that I get to call you about to have you come back.
Yes. Oh, goodness. So many strangely disconnected things.
I don't even know what's about to come out of your mouth. Okay.
No, we're making this retreat for a filmmaker in Kenya with a studio and and a retreat and kind of family space and retreat and studio and workspace and all of that on this UNESCO protected island um that's been kind of a trading center across India, Saudi Arabia, Africa for 1,000 years. And there are no cars, no bikes, no nothing. You just walk everywhere. And I'm going there at the end of the summer to start construction. So I'm super excited about that because it's sort of this intimate project, but it's quite substantial, and it's just in the most magical location you can imagine. And at the same time, we're doing this sort of cultural and heritage center in Ghana, which again, it's very much about linking back to it's definitely a repair project because it's about stitching back, identities, histories, bringing those threads back into the present, in order for people to be able to also then imagine new continuities, for these histories and sort of heritage of making, of art, of all kinds of different music, dance. It's a place where these traditions would live, and also where people would come and think about new interpretations, for it. And then we're doing competitions in the Middle East and and in Europe. So it feels very, I feel, yeah, it feels a little bit schizophrenic sometimes.
I was just like, when does she breathe? I'm just really, if you need an assistant in any of these
I
places,
do.
I am
Right? You
happy
want to come
to come
over?
in, just do whatever I couldn't design my way out of a paper bag, but I don't know. I'll carry your luggage. I'll fetch things. I mean, I love to travel. And it is just, I love hearing about these
Yeah.
places that I can't make it. I don't have enough time probably left in my life to make it in all the places I'd like to go. But
But you
I
should make
don't,
you can make it to many. You can make it to many
yes,
of them.
I'm going to do,
And
and
it's
I'm going to do as many as I can. As soon as you
yes.
said Kenya, I'm like,
Yeah.
how do I
It's like
get
on
on
the
that? Get
eastern
on that.
coast of Kenya.
Oh,
It's a magical, I cannot overstate, place. So I guess all this to say that I am blessed, incredibly fortunate, and I just love what I do. So it doesn't
well,
really matter. You can
that,
forgo sleep. It's fine.
yeah.
This
I'm
is
a
a
firm
privilege.
believer when you're passionate about what you do, that bleeds into everything you do because you mean
Yeah.
it. It matters
Oh
to
yeah.
you. And whether it's, mentoring your group of 16 to 21 year olds or designing a new restaurant or however you're changing the world. I'm a firm believer in just blowing the lid off of issues we face in this world
Yes.
and breaking every glass ceiling I can find. I've been doing it my entire adult life. I didn't have a woman. I worked
And
in my first architecture firm for 22 years, and I don't think we had our first female architect in that office till 10 or 15 years in working there. There's all kinds of different challenges that we have to take on in this world. And if we can't talk about them, we're never going to change them. If we can't make people walk in our shoes or whoever's shoes, regardless
yeah.
of what the fight is. So women in
Mhm.
architecture continue to face significant and persistent barriers.
Mm.
I'm not saying it hasn't improved. It improves. It slowly improves, but we're not there.
Mm.
We're far from being there. Black women, even more so. I did a little homework, and
Mm.
Black women represent less than 1% of licensed architects in this country.
Right.
That bothers the hell out of me.
Mm.
Um,
Mm.
what can we do? What can we do together to start breaking these barriers down, to open up these opportunities? What do we need to do to wake people up?
You know, a part of me is thinking that sadly, I'm not sure people need to be awoken. I think they're aware. And I think perhaps we actually have to start there. People are aware. The question is, how can people empathize even though they're aware? And this is not about architecture at all. This is a societal problem, right? Where if we don't see the other as the same kind of human, it's very difficult to have empathy. So I think it starts with empathy, and whether it's across race or across gender, there's an empathy that we lack, I think, for one another, or that those that carry more power um, might not necessarily have towards those who might be more vulnerable. And I think when it comes to architecture specifically, architecture is also a field that is incredibly harsh in general to everyone, and that is quite proud of its harshness, right? The endless nights, the sort of long hours, which I really try to stay away from. So as a firm, I also don't expect the people who work with me to be, to stay in the office until midnight, or anything. We have normal hours. Unless we have, there's a fire and we have a big project and all of a sudden something happens, okay, fine, we have to show up on a weekend. But these things don't happen often. It's very unusual. And we still manage to get the work done. So I think it's also about thinking about our practice differently so that the kinds of challenges that women encounter don't get in the way of them being able to perform in those settings, just because we've created this untenable sort of working conditions. And women do have different realities than men, period.
Yeah,
And
well,
different
somebody brought
challenges.
that man into the world. I
Exactly.
mean, it
Last I checked.
it is what it is. Only one of us can keep populating the planet.
Only one of us makes life.
Right,
So
but that should be celebrated,
exactly.
not minimized. I mean, I've worked my entire adult life having and raising children. But and trust me,
Yeah.
plenty of times that wasn't easy. But it's I really struggle because that lack of empathy. And again, I won't get political, but in our country right now, it's worse. I feel like it's worse than it's ever been,
Absolutely.
or in a very long time. And I can't abide this. And so, it's every day. How do I inject that empathy into other people? How do I?
I mean, all you can do, so that's a big cross to carry. I think all you can do is model it. That is the only thing that is within your control. You can model it, you advocate for it. That's as far as, it can go. Like I said, for me, I'm very mindful of working conditions. I'm a woman who had a child, as I was going to architectural school, as, I had a young child, I was trying to build my career. Right before this conversation, I was mentoring a young architect that I met. We were having our chat, and she just got married, and I was very open and just talking to her about thinking about her career and thinking about children. We get very personal. I think it's very important to talk about these things and not just act like you're just supposed to know how to deal with it. And I actually told her, I was like, listen, if you know that you want to have children, you should have them now. It will be easier, because we are being told as women that you focus on your career, that the model is that you focus on your career and then afterwards you have children. But then you're like 40. And usually by the time you're 38, 40, of course, then it's much more challenging to have children. So that's a different stress. Your attention, is elsewhere. But also, that's actually when your career might be peaking. And I just don't understand how we got to this conclusion that you do the career first and children later. It's completely backwards. I had my daughter in my late 20s, early 30s, which in my view is already late, from my point of view, right? And I'm so grateful for that, because now in my late 40s, I don't have to worry about that. I don't have to worry about the amount of energy it takes, as you know, child rearing, and having young children. And doing that in your 40s, it's kind of being unfair to ourselves. It's that much heavier. It's that much more difficult. And actually, it kneecaps us.
It's funny. I never thought about it that way. But I had my oldest son when I was 21,
See?
and my youngest son when I was 30.
Yeah.
I'm not
It's an asset.
I'm not
Having
going
them
to,
earlier.
yeah, I'm not going to add my number. We had plenty of challenges. I had plenty of challenges being a young mother and learning how to do all these things, and working full time. But now looking back, all done, they're grown. I joke, they're cooked out of the oven and they're doing great.
Exactly.
They're taking care of their space in the world. They're good humans. I am so glad I'm not dealing with that at this age.
Exactly. And I find it inexplicable that the conversation is still about, yes, go, I want to work on my career. That's just the motto that we're giving young women. And we're saying, focus on your career. You can build a family later. Yes, of course you can. But if you do want a family, is that actually the right way to think about it? Because it's actually much easier to kind of lag a little bit in your career towards the beginning and then make up for it later than the opposite.
Exactly. Ladies,
me,
you're getting some serious wisdom here.
I started my career as an architect at age 34 because it was my second career. So it's fine. Don't worry.
Yeah, you'll get there.
The real game is later.
Yeah.
Actually. And there's plenty of career to go.
Yeah. And a little less energy at 40 than you have at 20.
A little.
Yeah. To juggle 25 different balls at once.
I cannot imagine doing it now. I don't have that kind of strength.
No.
No. But I feel like we have to have.
No, definitely.
We should be honest about that. And I don't understand why we still believe that to just be true. I think we've proved that it's incredibly difficult. And it's emotionally challenging. Again, when you delay it. And not everybody can choose when they have a family if they want one,
Right.
But if you can, definitely, ladies, have them first, worry about your career after. Because then all you do, it's just smooth sailing from there. And you can actually focus on your work and your passions to the end. No interruption.
We need to start a group. No,
I'm saying.
You don't need anything else to do. I am just now learning to find balance, which I do want to say, though, that our younger generation, and I have a 38-year-old son and a 30-year-old son, and their 5 bazillion friends over the years. And so, and tons of mentoring. So I feel qualified to say that they are doing things differently. They are demanding more of that balance and demanding of their employers. I don't want to work there if I'm going to be here till midnight every night.
Right. That's not acceptable. It's not, no. That should not just be a norm.
Exactly. And that's what I tell them all the time. If you're not working for a company that serves you, because there's still this mindset in a lot of places in architecture that if I hired you and I'm paying you, you need to give me whatever I ask you for. No matter how much of your blood, sweat, tears, time, I don't care if you have a sick kid at home, whatever, I'm paying you. What are you paying me for? That's my answer back to that question. You're paying me for a skill set and labor that I'm giving you. It's supposed to be a two-way street.
Exactly.
And it should be back to that, like your relationship with the contractor, that equal respect. What did that result in? An amazing project that went darn near seamlessly. It's no different in the workplace. You, whoever my superior is, respect me for not only who I am and that I do have a life that's not a part of work, and respect me for what I have to offer and my talents and my skills. And I am going to want to give you the best part of me in my work life, my best work person. But, one of the things I love about the company I work for now is they recognize that we are whole people with other things going on in our life. And they work really, really hard to make sure that we maintain that. There is no expectation of these crazy hours. You call in, you've had a life event.
That's right.
Not only will they bend over backwards to help accommodate you, but they'll help you if they can.
Right.
And on the flip side, we all work really hard and we like being here.
Exactly.
And like being
because
with each other.
You're cared for.
Exactly.
So, of course, then you will give that care back.
Exactly. And so I'm hoping that the journey for our younger professionals will be a little different than what we saw, but I do believe they can also demand some of these things. They can, they're huge generations behind us.
Right.
Millennials are ginormous, bigger than the boomers. And so is Gen Z. Both of them are bigger than the boomers. They have all the power now and they just haven't figured it out yet.
That's true.
Well, they know because we just told them. All this wisdom just broke the code for you people. Take care. Yes. Fix this planet. Yeah, do it now. So final question. I asked it before. I'm going to ask it again. We all hope to live a life that leaves some kind of contribution to make a better place. I feel stupid even asking you this question because this whole interview has been about your contributions to make this world a better place. But for you, personal or professional, what is just one of the 50,000 things you're doing? What is it you hope your impact will be?
I mean, my answer is not necessarily different from what I gave last time. So let me maybe think about it differently. Lately, I've been thinking about, more on a personal level. Since we're talking about womanhood and we're talking about careers and all of that, I have a 16-year-old daughter who will be leaving me for college next year.
Oh,
I know.
It's hard.
Devastating.
It's hard.
Oh. But I'm thinking about, when we're talking about impact, I'm wondering what is it that I have given her? Have I prepared her? Is it, I think all parents think about that, did I prepare them? Did I give them what they needed? Are they armed, for the world that they're going to be facing? What is that kind of impact? Because I think it's an impact that we don't necessarily talk about when we ask these questions, because we always think about impact in terms of our productive life from a work point of view. And I'm just wondering about just kind of this localized impact within this one individual, whether I've had the right kind of impact. That is really keeping me up. Did I travel too much? Going back again to, the challenges of having a career and being a woman, and all of that, did I travel too much? Did I give enough attention? Did I, this is very personal, but I think it actually shouldn't be. I think those are things that maybe it would be wonderful if we could think about and talk about with one another in terms of how we shape the next generations that we are rearing. That's also a different kind of impact.
Well, because what bigger, because I've thought about this a lot, both personal and professional. I have all kinds of, I'd like to change the world in 100 different ways. hashtag is total world domination. I just want to make it all better. But when I really like dig down deep and I think about, what am I leaving behind on this planet that might have made a difference? The most important thing is my sons.
Right.
I lived with did I raise good men? And
exactly.
I also worked that guilt we put on ourselves is heavy. That guilt that, I was at work. Was I at work too much? Was I involved in enough things? All of those things. I used to spend 18-hour days when I was raising my kids to try and do it all so that I wouldn't fail them.
Exactly.
But one thing I have over you is mine are grown and they're out living in the world. And I'm getting to see whether, did I totally mess this up? Or,
right.
Did I get it right? And I tell people all the time, this, oh, Cherise, you've accomplished all these things people at one point would have said you never could. And the most important one to me is that I put these really amazing human beings on this planet that are open-minded and they are empathetic and they are welcoming of all different kinds of people, because I would have just beat them if they weren't.
Probably.
I wouldn't have beat them, but I mean, that would not have gone over well in my house. But yeah, it was a joke for anybody out there that thinks that was serious. But
we're not condoning corporal punishment.
No, do not beat your children. But, I always looked at motherhood as my job is to put a good human on this planet, not to be your best friend, not to make everything easy for you.
Exactly.
Not to be hard, or I was a very affectionate, loving mother. But my kids own their mistakes, and my kids had to take care of things in school because that was their job as a kid. And that's preparing you to be somebody, a productive citizen in the, that could take care of themselves someday. Right. My job was to put a good human on the planet. And I can look now because they're both grown, and one is married and one is getting married next year. We're very excited about that.
Wonderful.
And my oldest son has 2 children, and he's an amazing father.
That's beautiful.
And I can look and say, okay, that is my shining achievement, because I'm not going to be here someday. But did I send something into this world that's going to keep trying to make it better? Exactly. Or did I put a scourge of the earth on the planet that's going to make it worse? And I didn't. So I'm giving you permission to get rid of some of that guilt, because
okay, thank you.
while you may not have been there every moment of everything for your daughter, just like I wasn't for my kids, there are other things you are passively teaching her about hard work, about passion, about putting everything into something that matters. And all of these things that you're at 16, you're probably not seeing that she appreciates that yet. But
I'm definitely not seeing it.
Yeah, no, not at 16. No, you won't. But I will promise you that she is going to come to you at one point.
Thank you.
My oldest son has already done it. He did it after his daughter was born. And he came to me, and this is my less emotional, demonstrative child. And he came to me and he said, Mom, I get it. I get it now. I understand all of those things that you did that irritated me. I understand. I totally get it. And it's the best day in the world.
Honestly, I'm living it vicariously through you. I was like, to hear those words.
I can't imagine your day isn't coming, because if she's your daughter, you have infused that in her, but they just go through these phases that they should be shipped off to a desert island and brought back when they're human again.
Basically.
7th grade, 3.5 to 4.5. And some
3.5.
Yeah, there's no terrible
twos.
They call it
the terrible twos.
See, yeah,
exactly.
They're evil. It's 3.5. No,
it's 3.5, and it lasts a whole year, and it's inexplicable, and they're possessed. Oh my gosh!
And 7th grade. 7th grade, that the hormones.
7th grade was also. It's the beginning.
Yeah.
The beginning.
You'll get yours. I promise. Yours is coming. So just know there's hope.
But yes, but this is the, my contribution in the world right now. I'm thinking about that contribution, the human that I'm sending out in the world. That's the contribution I'm focused on
Yeah.
right now.
I'm pretty confident we got a pretty cool human coming. Mariam, I can't tell you how honored I am that you agreed to come back and chat with me. I'm not kidding.
Oh,
We're going to be doing more of these because
I'm here for it all day long.
Yeah,
Like I want to have these chats all the time.
Well, and we can certainly chat anytime you like, but
Yes.
this needs to be a friendship that's long lasting. And so thank
I
you.
agree. Thank
So
you.
much. And I can't wait to see you. And remember, you need somebody to carry your luggage to Kenya.
Right?
I'm here
let you
for
know.
it.
Definitely. We might be able to work something out.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you again.
Thank you, Cherise.